As the structure of human civilization changes over time, this is reflected in the types of people which exist and hence whom we can interact with, as the social groups we create reflect the changing times. We know that the primary social unit today is the modern nation, but there are also various subcultures within each, businesses and organizations, and also trends in politics, music, and fashion, which indicate the direction things are going in. Whether places are moving to the right or the left, becoming more religious or liberal, making new global alliances, we should be able to see trends arising which point to the overall future we're heading towards. In the ancient world, new empires appeared and conquered previous civilizations, while new religions had the biggest impact in the Middle Ages. In the modern period, people began to take control of parliaments away from traditional rulers. But now we're living in a more interconnected global economy. The new question is over the multipolar political environment, and it means everybody needs to find a direction for themselves. For example, in the modern periods, people used fine materials like silk and satin to demonstrate their wealth, while social movements became revolutionary, communism and fascism. In the postmodern age, these were replaced in the West with more progressive types of music and fashion culture, such as rock and roll in the 1950s, the Teddy Boy movement in the 1960s, and from these subcultures emerged countercultures such as the hippie, beatnik, and anti-nuclear movements, which criticized society and the government. In the 1970s, these evolved into punk and new wave, but the mainstream culture responded in the 1980s with house music and rave, using electronic music which represented the computer age, and reworking of classical music scores for electronic instruments showed that mainstream society can reinvent itself. The 1990s brought something else with hip-hop and rap, and the record companies, dance clubs and fashion houses have evolved over time to cope with public demand. Since the 2000s, the internet has produced another new audience, and many new protagonists have arisen to deliver a message. In response, communist countries largely banned Western fashion movements, film, television, and social media. So we can see that the world has been polarized in a social sense as well as a political. While the West has produced various human rights, animal rights, women's rights, environmental and anti-nuclear movements, thus we can expect to see these driving change in terms of new ideas, but then also expect communist countries to respond to this in terms of the way that they deal with global politics as a whole. So there appears to be a particular type of relationship between East and West at the moment, which has evolved out of the Cold War, and that is that the West tends to see progress as a solution, while the communist countries then respond to that, and they create new ideas in a governmentally controlled way to counterbalance the effect of the free market, the unreformed capitalism. So, if you join something, the main question is, how does it help you? Will you be able to create the type of progress that you see as being the right thing to do, or will you be simply used to achieve somebody else's goal or profit? Usually in successful groups, there is a compromise of individual aims for a common cause. In general, across the world, we can see a trend towards people becoming more serious about what they're seen to be doing. They want to appear more responsible. While it was the fashion to celebrate extremes of personal freedom in the West during the Cold War, now simply being part of a fashion movement does not seem to be enough to make a statement, mainly because there is less social control to rebel against, and thus less of a statement to be made, and environmental issues like climate change causing a shift towards a sense of greater responsibility. People still consume music, film, and art for pleasure, but in terms of social movements, we're starting to see several key trends emerging, one of which is an increasing regard for the importance of the environment, leading to a merging of environmentalism and politics. But there is also an increase in the representation of people who want change, and minority groups by mainstream political parties. Thirdly, the ability of social media to organize large-scale gatherings and events means that people all over the world are becoming aware of everything that's happening very quickly. Hence, the shift towards taking more responsibility for ourselves and relying less on the direction of mainstream society to determine our views seems to be taking us out of post-modernity. But we can still see mainstream society as being a guideline for the way things are going. Many are coming to favor computerized models as they enable us to talk in terms of provable facts and statistics based on collected data from sources over time, so they cannot be accused of prejudice or favoritism. Today's technology literate people are finding solutions to problems which could not be solved previously and creating technology that can be applied to other areas. As methods have become more computerized, school, college, and university work can be submitted online, leading to a wider accessibility to education around the world, and teachers can show students material from anywhere, rather than having to rely on textbooks bought by a school. So perhaps today's students will become more intelligent in general, and this will add depth to societies as they will create more solid arguments to create the change that we need, and resist change which is not beneficial to us. However, today's older generation who grew up before the internet may appear more integrated into postmodern culture in which specialist skills are more desirable. People who grew up with the internet have had access to more types of knowledge and think in a more universal way, and we will as a society be moving forward because of this. However, there is always something of a power struggle between people who want to do things in a new way and those who want to with existing methods. It is typical that the new types of people always tend to be more open-minded than those of the past, particularly about the way things should be done. Yet there are also some very closed communities where people must hold certain beliefs to be accepted. As the shift to a more objective worldview is created, in general there is a dynamic between the new and the old which looks set to play itself out, and eventually many of these areas will change or simply get left behind. In recent years, computers have had a massive effect on culture as binary is a universal language, so it crosses all cultural boundaries and can be learned by anyone. Something which has also happened in recent years is a centralization of everyone's computerized records, such as date of birth, national insurance number, etc. So it's easier to keep track of what people are doing. Now, governments can access everything on one database and easily share information, so it's important to keep a clean record. This is also producing a more intense debate over what is legal. For example, how far should governments go in terms of spying on people and monitoring the situation? Should it be to protect society from terrorists, or should they go further to fight crime? If so, will they be pushing into the structural issues of society itself, and thus create the danger of moving towards a police state, which is what happens when governments refuse to admit the responsibility for their problems? Then we see powers which should be reserved for emergencies being granted on an everyday basis, and the feeling that society is living in a permanent crisis, when governments become determined to wipe out one type of social behavior or another. Therefore, it is good to allow robust debate in politics over the type of society we want to achieve and the way we're going about this in practical terms, and services to function appropriately. Computers also mean governments have an easier time managing departments, as it is easier to redesign practices, policies, and procedures. This can mean redirecting funds or editing guidelines, and the ability to publish new agendas more quickly can also mean the situation evolves faster. However, it also means a change in government can more easily cause a complete change in system, from the top level through the civil service down. The old paperwork system, which was designed to deliver steady results, could only work so fast in relation to the rate at which regulations could be printed and physically distributed worldwide. Documents had to be printed periodically, and updating them could take years. Now they can be delivered across a whole country in minutes. This also allows constant feedback between governments and the citizenship, and between governments and the UN, which helps them to better manage the global situation. Hence, while the end of the 20th century saw many social movements which identified themselves with protest or social change, reforms or progress of some kind, now what we're seeing is a corresponding shift towards an increased responsibility which goes with both citizens and government. In recent years, the reform of many government departments has occurred in the form of online services, so people can apply for visas, passports, insurance, along with the use of online banking and shopping services, which enable businesses and individuals to order goods. So to sum up, changes in the way we live is creating a new type of people, and this would appear to follow the general trend towards the modernization and computerization of society, and people are becoming more aware of what's happening due to public access to more information via the internet. However, as usual, we're seeing the social groups which exist now reflect the changing times. So in the next video, I'll be looking at the way human thinking has changed with the ages and see how it logically arrives at the philosophy of our time. In the meantime, thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for further updates.